All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I keep thinking it's Wednesday. I don't know about you all, but I'm Allie Wyatt, co founder and CEO of Female Founder Collective and the 10th House, which is our private membership community. I'm super excited to have Ruffin Mitchener on this show, I guess you would call it today, to talk about all things funding and social media and the intersection between the two. She's super knowledgeable, and I, for one, love reading all of the content that she puts out there and watching all the content that she puts out there. So it's such a treat to have you today. As a quick note, before I dive in with Ruffin, we just launched our tech cohort, which is super exciting. We launch a cohort every 2 months inside of the 10th house. And this one is really for the founders out there building things in fintech, in femtech, in um, retail tech, whatever kind of tech you're in. This is a community for you so that you guys can share all of the details around things like getting funding, around the things like building your MVP, or what is your go-to-market strategy, or how do you think about benchmarks for your business, and how do you think about scaling for your business, all the things that you come up against. So definitely join us inside. I'm going to get into Ruffin's bio. She is a creator, a startup advisor, and an angel investor in her media brand, Bridge Club, has reached over 30 million women in startups, tech, and VC. She also advises select startups on viral content strategy, and she previously earned her MBA from UCLA Anderson. I tried to merge those two words together, and led financial operations at Peer Street, a financial technology startup. And she has invested in brands like Alinea Invest and Upkeep, the Glow Up app, and is on the pulse of all things funding, which is what I'm super excited to get into. But without further ado, we got so many questions from the people that are attending today as well. So I want to go fast and furious with you because people are ready to pick your brain. And the first question I have is, why did you start Bridge Club? And can you tell us a little bit about it and what led you
Yeah,
in that direction?
lovely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I feel like I'm normally the one interviewing folks, so it's fun and exciting being on the other side of things. But yeah, so I started Bridge Club. Like you mentioned in my bio, I was working at an early stage fintech company, and I actually went back to UCLA for business school because I wanted to start something in the fintech, real estate tech space as well. And so at the time, I was just looking for stories of female founders and listening to every How I Built This podcast that was featuring a woman building in tech. Um, and yeah, I think I was just super inspired by the stories that I was hearing, and I wanted to see more of those stories. So when I was in school, I actually got on TikTok originally because I was like, oh, I need this viral channel to launch this organic marketing engine for the real estate tech business that I wanted to build but did not end up
Yeah.
building. And so when I did not go down that path, I started pivoting all my content to basically telling the stories of the women building in tech and the women in venture that inspired me so much. And so it came to be we became known for our 60-second How She Built This story. So I'll do a 60-second feature on Melanie Perkins, the founder of Canva. And then that spun into meeting different women in the space. And so naturally, the next step was a podcast so that I could actually bring these women in and have them tell their side to the story and learn a bit more from that side of things. So random journey of getting here, but it's been an exciting path.
I feel like we all have random journeys to getting there. Um, During market downturns, right now is one of them. Investors are much less likely to bet on underrepresented founders. So, what advice do you have, just in all the people that you've interconnected with in Bridge Club and also in your interviews? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And what do you think is some great advice that you would give to the founders who are trying so
Yeah.
hard to raise in this moment?
Yeah. Yeah. I think even during times when we're not in a downturn, you just have to be extremely strategic about
Yeah.
how you're approaching a fundraise. And I think you have to remember that it's very much a relationship game. So, even if you compare it to the interview process, I think the most effective founders start thinking about the fundraise maybe like a year, 9 months, 6 months before they're ever actually going to go out and raise. And so
Yeah.
I think you can do that really tactically by, for example, even just starting by putting together like a database of 100, 200 investors that invest in your stage and in your sector. From there,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, of those investors, who do you have like a mutual connection to? So like literally start logging and tracking all of that. If there's a fund that you would love to meet that you don't have a mutual connection with, maybe go to their website, check out their portfolio. Is there a founder that's like a little bit ahead of you that you could like reach out to, get advice, build a relationship with them? And then when you ultimately go to raise, you do kind of have a little bit of a foot in the door. So I think it's, just being strategic, really planning ahead, and then I think approaching it in more of like a relationship network based approach.
Yeah, I've heard from all of the best investors that give that advice and the founders that have raised money to start raising capital way before you start raising capital. In other words, create those relationships like you're talking about in a really organic, authentic way and ask for advice, and then perhaps you'll get money down the line, but you'll definitely strike up a real relationship with the investors you want to be in front of. A significant part of Bridge Club's mission is to get in front of more women that are in check writing positions, and to also get more women into those positions. Can you discuss how people can get started as angel investors?
Yes. So this was something that was like completely foreign to me. And so I think it's, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to help other women get into the space. So for me, I started angel investing just last summer. So I'm very brand new to investing.
Welcome.
And thank you. I personally, because I had not like worked in VC before I started angel investing, I wanted to find a community where I could learn from others and co-invest alongside other women or other investors. So I personally chose to join an angel community called The Council. There's a ton of other angel communities like the Hustle Fund, Modern Angels. I'm sure there's many other ones, and like even your local startup community that you can join and participate in. And I basically personally set aside X dollars that I'd like to invest in 10 companies over the next year. And then have basically been able to co-invest alongside members of the council. And I think it's a great way to get started just because, we do group pitch calls, group diligence. And so you can kind of hear like how other women and other investors are thinking about things. And at least in the council, there's like a Slack channel where you can basically drop in any kind of questions you have about investing. And so I think these angel communities are a great way to get started.
Yeah.
Typically in an angel community, you do have to be accredited. So for not accredited investors, there's other options like Fundraising actually just launched their innovation fund. And so it's a way to invest in companies like Canva, even if you are not yet accredited. There's platforms like WeFunder, Republic,
Yeah.
other options
I didn't
for.
realize that you could invest in companies like Canva. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a new fund they just launched.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Notably on that stuff, what I also like to sort of warn people about is it's a super risky asset class because entrepreneurship is like a minefield. So if you are not accredited, there's reasons why they have accreditation standards. It's typically because you could lose a lot of money very quickly in private small companies. So there's no sort of board of governance. You don't necessarily have information. There's no control over sort of how the company is doing. So definitely, I love the notion of getting involved, but just make sure you educate yourself as well before doing so. And then, Ruffin, what kind of businesses do you typically invest in personally? Like, what have you found interesting? And what are maybe some, if you haven't invested in these types of businesses, what are the industries that you find to be most interesting right now?
Yeah. So I am definitely prioritizing teams with at least one female founder. I'm looking at deals in the pre-seed and seed stages. But as a new angel, I've kind of decided that I want to invest across a number of different spaces so that I can kind of understand what I'm really excited about, and then like start to lean into things as I see things that are starting to work. So I've invested in a company called Upkeep Beauty. You can think of them as the class pass for booking any of your med spa treatments. I've invested in a company called Alinea Invest, so an app for investing for Gen Z investors. I've invested in August, a sustainable period company. I've invested in a company called Yard Sale, basically innovating in sports tech, specifically ski equipment. So basically a pretty broad range. And yeah, as a new investor, kind of just trying to try out different spaces, and then we'll start to lean into what I think is really exciting.
And do you have a specific diligence process or something maybe that you've learned through the council that you take into these investments and that helps you assess whether or not it's a good fit for you?
Yeah. I think one thing I'm really trying to lean into, and this can't always be the case, is like at the pre-seed and seed stages, especially, it's like very much about the team. So, for example, two of the deals that I've invested in, I've built like year-long relationships with the founders before
Yeah.
I ever invested. Obviously, not possible always, but I think just like really understanding and getting to know the founders, what their background is, why I think they're the right person to build this company is something I definitely very much focus on. And then I think the other basics are like trying out the product or service, like making sure I actually like using that. Like, do I see that there's actual need there? And then, like, of course, diving into like the different metrics for the business and the competitive landscape.
In the pre-seed stages, so you talked about trying out the product or service, right?
Yeah.
And in the pre-seed stage, a lot of times people don't even have their product yet.
Yeah.
How can you help people like you, investors like you, to show something that could get them aligned to what ultimately you're building as a founder?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so. So I guess at the pre-seed, like certain companies will have products. For example, the yard sale company I mentioned, they have products shipped and live.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're building more of like a software business, it may not
Yeah.
actually be out in the market. So I think if you can show like any kind of traction, I think it like very much depends on what type of business you are building, but maybe it's like wait lists or signups or like some kind of proof that there is demand and need
Yeah.
for the business you're building. But again, I think it looks very different depending on what business you are building.
And do you feel like demos are important? Like if you're a tech business and say you're building an app, have you seen a lot of businesses put that in, particularly in this landscape? Because it's like I find a lot of tech founders are saying, I need to raise money to build my MVP, but like now investors are saying you need an MVP and I need to see what this looks like before I give you money. So it's sort of a
I,
chicken and the egg.
yeah, I think anything you can do to show and explain to investors and paint a story of who you are and what you're building is helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. So for when you're thinking about tech investments and the tech landscape specifically, what do you think? I know we talked more broadly about founders and the funding landscape, how they're going to, how they can receive investment in this sort of time and stage. What are some distinguishing factors that you think are setting businesses apart that like maybe make it across your desk and that you want to interview somebody for,
Yeah.
that are getting well funded?
Yeah. I think like anything you can do to stand out to investors and grab their attention, and
Yeah.
like have investors come to you. I find that, and this is just because I'm probably on social media too much, but I think personally when I'm seeing a founder doing something really cool and interesting on social media, like that just immediately stands out to me. It's a company that I'm gonna at least like go download or try out their product and just like kind of keep eyes and tabs on what they're doing. One
Yeah.
company comes to mind, the Style app, great use case to check out what they are doing on social media, but basically they're building kind of like the tender for shopping. So they're basically building an app where you can swipe right or left on clothes, and then it basically learns what you like to shop. And the founder is a Duke student, and he's basically gone on and done this like really fun series where he's doing like day 5 of trying to get Alex Earl as my co-founder. So just like absurd social media tactics that grab people's attention. And then, yeah, I think that's one way. I think another way you can stand out is just like building a good product and like standing out to investors in that way. So I think
Yeah.
there's just a number of ways to try and get investors to come to you.
Let's talk about social media, right? Because that's something that you've been absolutely exceptional at, right? It's a superpower. You've gotten a ton of views. What do you think? And you also consult brands, right, on
Yes.
their
Yes.
strategy from a content perspective, specifically social. What are some of the things that you recommend to founders building businesses, especially when they're so busy, right? Like you're trying to fundraise, you're trying to build your MVP, you're trying to build your go-to-market strategy. It's like it's never ending to-do list of priorities. How should they think about social media, and what are some like simple principles that they can employ to
Yeah.
help them stand out?
Yeah. I think, first of all, like in terms of prioritization, I think if you're building anything in consumer, this should be a top priority for you, because I think if you can build your organic social channel, like that's just going to have ripple effects to everything you're doing. So I would put it high end of your priority list. I guess just in terms of tactics, the first thing like I tell people to do is like basically go on TikTok, go on Instagram Reels, and maybe choose 5 accounts that you're really inspired by, and just basically start by like studying exactly what they're doing. So look at like their video structures, the trends that they're using, and then essentially just start trying to put a twist on those videos and kind of creating our own content based on what you're seeing is performing on other people's channels. Give yourself a hard 30 days, post once a day, and chances are you will get some traction. It's really just like a numbers game and paying attention to what's working on the platform. I guess those are just like technical strategy, but I can also dive
Yeah.
more into like high level strategy too.
I'd love to hear that. I would love for you to go more high level, but one question I do have as a follow on to that
Yeah.
is you're thinking about, okay, so you post once a day for 30 days. How long should that take you? Like, because I think I'm a perfectionist. I'm sure a lot of the founders, I feel like most founders are perfectionists and you want to control everything. When should you just set it live? Or do you sort of create like this is the amount of time I'm going to give this? These are quick and easy ways to create content,
Yeah.
right? That will ultimately perform, because people
Yeah.
obviously aren't full-time content creators.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I would say in the first 30 days, there's definitely going to be a bit of a learning curve. So content creation may take a little bit longer, but like once you figure out what works, like it becomes extremely repeatable, and you can have like, for example, like a female founder series where you like know exactly what's going into that 60-second video. You know what's going to be in your hook. You're just going to change it out a little bit, based on the story that you're doing. And then there's things like, a 60-second talking video is obviously going to take a lot more time in terms of planning, research, editing, but like a trending video might take you 10 minutes to make. And so it's like, do a mix of those things so that content creation is scalable and like it's not taking up your day to day. And then, I mean, there's other things like, for example, the companies I work with, and normally this doesn't really make sense until you're at like a seed stage and you have the money to do this, but a lot of companies are hiring what we call UGC creators. And so companies I work with will basically go out, scout a creator that might have like a micro following, so under like 40,000. They're basically looking for different ways to make money. So we'll bring them in.
Nowadays?
I guess. I don't know.
Under 40,000.
Random number. Basically, like they have experience creating content, but I know that they're not bankrolling their life based on their channel size, which is why we tend to target people in that kind of following range. And they essentially become kind of the face of the channel, and so the content creation is taken off of the founder's plate. But I do think it is cool to kind of
I love that.
see the founder story too, and so it doesn't make sense for every brand, is I guess what I'll say.
How do you scout somebody like that? Because I think that's a really good recommendation, especially because a lot of founders don't want to be on video. Like I don't like being on video, right? Unless I'm talking to a really interesting founder or business person. I think it's something that's really it's challenging if you aren't somebody who wants to be in front of a camera. So
Yeah.
where do you
It's kind of a mix. Sometimes I'll just like cold DM creators. Other
yeah,
times I'll go through like there's community channels like Beacons AI has a community just for creators because I'm a creator. I'm in those types of communities. There's like a women and influencer marketing that has like a really strong community. There's like even like managers. Like a lot of these creators have managers, and so I'm working with those managers. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's yeah, this whole, I guess, niche new industry. It's very fascinating.
Influencers. Is that what it was called?
Women and influencer marketing.
Women in influencer marketing, and then
Yeah.
Beacon AI. Okay.
Yes. Two
Everybody
great
write that down. Good places to look. Okay. So sorry, now you were going to go high level, but that was
yeah. So I guess when I'm like thinking about founders and brands that have done a good job on social, like Poppy comes to mind. I think probably everyone has seen their videos on TikTok or Instagram, but I think high level what makes it work is that they've really built good trust and also relatability with their brand. So like one of their first videos that went massively viral, like got 100 million views on TikTok, was basically the founder going on and basically sharing her story of like, I had gut health issues. I started creating these recipes in my kitchen. I learned that apple cider vinegar was great for gut health, but like I hated the taste. And so I started creating these recipes that led to Poppy. Then I got on Shark Tank at 9 months pregnant. And so I think just creating kind of that relatability and that storytelling of like why you are the right person to build this business. Another great example are my founders from Alinea Invest. They're again building the app for Gen Z investors. And basically, the two women that started this company had both worked on Wall Street. They saw basically old rich men getting rich investing, but like none of their friends were investing. And so they basically quit Wall Street, which again is kind of like their trust and reasoning for why they're the right people building the company, and then have now built Alinea Invest. So again, just kind of like sharing that founder story and like repeatedly sharing it so people kind of really understand who you are, what the brand stands for, and it's not just like Poppy or Alinea Invest. You kind of understand the backstory of who's behind those brands.
And that's really important for pitching purposes to investors as well.
Yeah.
Like two birds with one stone. And the more you're out there as the face of your brand and the storyteller behind it, the more your investors are going to think that you're important to the business, which is.
And I think it's like an interesting, you can kind of try out different ways of telling your story on social media, and that can help you iterate. And then once you do get to a pitch, you kind of know what works and what paints a great story.
Ruffin, how do you think about channels and what channels are right for your business? I actually interviewed Melanie Travis from Andy last week, and she was talking about how she's like, you don't have to, I don't believe you should be everywhere and in every channel because you only have so many resources, especially as a small business. So how should founders think about what channel am I on? Like, where do I really go deep? Or should they try to be a little bit everywhere?
Yeah. Yes, definitely depends on what business you're building. I think like any kind of short form video is great for like a consumer facing app where someone can go and like download something or go and shop a product like pretty immediately. If you're creating short form video, it should go on all YouTube Shorts, Reels, and TikTok. Might as well use the content.
One asset to be on all of them, or do you suggest? Okay.
One asset for all three channels. And what's interesting is that I often see one video, like videos perform differently on each channel. One might pop on Instagram and not on TikTok. So it's good to diversify across channels. I think LinkedIn is a very sneaky, powerful channel. So especially if you're like a B2B business, like selling, for example, I worked with a company that was basically selling software solutions to employers to help employers pay down employees' student loans. And so ghostwriting on LinkedIn, you can actually even hire someone to ghostwrite for you as the founder if that's like not something you want to spend your time on. It's actually a very, very powerful channel. So
I would agree with that. It is a very sneaky channel. We
yes.
find the same thing, but it is. I think it does tend to be more in like sort of B2B arenas.
Yes.
I don't know how it is for consumer, but I remember at Goop we actually had a pretty big LinkedIn following.
I think
Wow.
for a consumer founder, it could be valuable in the sense that like if you continue to share your updates in terms of like potential investors. So if you think about it that way, and there'd be like a bit of a different
That's
strategy
a
in the
great way
content.
to
But
stand out in terms of
yeah,
getting
I
investors
find
on board,
I've
like you
seen people
said.
be really successful by just kind of sharing different company updates on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, the way that you would have like a newsletter to your investors for your company updates, like put those on LinkedIn too with what you're willing to share publicly to kind of create some hype and just more touch points for people as you're
And
building.
also creating like a point of view about your industry and
Yeah,
positioning yourself as a leader. If you're writing about that, you can take sort of an excerpt from your investor update or whatever you're sending out, which you should, if you are
yes.
about to fundraise. Great hot tip that forgot what fund GP told me this, but they're like the people that send out like a newsletter, even if I didn't invest initially, maybe in their pre-seed round, like I'm looking at those, I am reading
Yes.
those. And every single time I get that note, even if I don't read the whole thing, in my head, that person is going way up in my book. So again, like keep that list warm from a CRM perspective and keep track of that person and send them those updates because I feel like at the other end they're listening. And the
I
same
think
principle on LinkedIn.
after any kind of, if you get rejected from a VC, like immediately ask them, can I include you on my investor updates? Because you might not
Yeah.
realize like maybe the fund at the time that you originally pitched them like just like doesn't have capital to deploy. There's like so many things, or they didn't have the capacity on the team to even diligence the deal. So there's so many things that could be going on in the background, and it could just be a timing issue. And so
Yeah.
definitely great to add people onto that investor list.
Claire G asked a relevant question, which is what companies can we look for or look to for content and newsletter inspiration?
For newsletters specifically, I guess I'll give content. Home from College, Locker, Genshi, let's see, the Style app, Alinea, Upkeep. Threw a lot out there. Those all
Love
come
it.
to mind.
I love those. I'm also going to throw out there get on VC's lists because some of them, like first round, does a first round review and it's phenomenal. It's like, it's such helpful content as well. It's really good advice that they garner from their massive portfolio of CEOs. But I also feel like just staying up to date, especially if you are fundraising, see what they talk about and what they find interesting and they find are like the most salient and important updates for people to know because that also shows what their priorities are and gives you insight into how they think about their investments and what's performing well and how you can state traction. So I think that's another great thing to always do. Um, I'm going to start going into audience questions because I have so many of them. Jennifer said, I'm going to go to Jacqueline's because it's relevant to what we just talked about. I'll come back to yours, Jennifer. Jacqueline says, does social media content that appeals to investors differ from content that appeals to customers?
I would say probably all your social content, at least, I guess it depends what your goal is. If you're on probably Instagram, TikTok, I would be building content for customers. And I think that will interest investors just because they'll see kind of the community that you're building and driving around your content. But again, maybe like LinkedIn is your channel where you're making content for investors specifically.
I would 100% agree with that. So there's a nice halo, in other words, from
Yes.
anything you're doing for the consumer, but then you can actually focus on driving investor interest through LinkedIn and also driving, as you scale the business, potential employee interest.
Yes,
Um,
that's
and then Elizabeth B asked how you can break through the noise on TikTok. Like,
Yeah.
how did you do that? Right. Like, do you have any insight into like, okay, these are the couple things that I always recommend to get in
So
front of
I
people?
think so I think if I really think about it for me, and I think you can apply this to the other examples I've shared today, it's like really that trust piece. So I use UCLA, like going to UCLA Business School, that was like my platform that I was able to break through the noise with. So it was like sharing my story about getting into UCLA Business School, like my MBA application process. But like it just goes back to UCLA was like my sticker, logo, whatever, that kind of created that trust from like I was just obviously a complete stranger to people. So it's like maybe what is that for you? For the Alinea Invest team, again, to that example, their logo or their trust factor was like working on Wall Street. So it's like think about, and then Poppy, it was like being on Shark Tank, for example. So I think
Yeah.
that is what you should anchor kind of your original content creation in. And then there's like all the strategies of like your videos should have a good hook if you're doing like the longer formats. Like what are you saying in that first sentence or two to like really catch people's attention? It can be something like really absurd to draw people in. And then the other thing is like,
Do you
okay,
get
maybe
mad about that?
um
If you put something that's like, because sometimes I feel like people get upset with us. For
yes.
example, newsletters. Maybe some of you are listening that have gotten upset with me in the past, where we'll write a newsletter and the title will be one thing, and then it's like maybe 50% of the newsletter is about that, but not all of it.
I feel like the absurd hooks might just drive some like commenting, which is kind of the reasoning for
Yeah.
doing it, which
Yeah.
increases the engagement. And then I guess other than hooks and stuff, like jumping on the viral trends, because that's like one of the best ways to basically
How do you
pop.
find the viral trends, like trending sounds, and like where do you
Yeah,
find those?
that's kind of goes back to like the studying piece. You really do just have to like give yourself maybe 30 minutes a day where you're swiping through and looking at different creators. Like I'm always looking at like finance or tech creators and like kind of
Yeah.
seeing what they're doing with trends and then putting my own spin on things. So there is a bit of like studying and just like being on the platforms to understand what's going on and then jumping on them quickly.
So there's not like platforms that you use to help you cut through and figure that out, right? The trending sounds or the trending.
No, but I'm sure those exist. But for me, it's just easier to kind of follow and look at what's happening.
Got it. That's helpful. And now you can say to your spouse or your friend or whoever is with you and is like, get off of your phone, which is what my
Yes.
husband said. Like, I'm on it for work.
No, that's a true thing for me, actually. It's terrible.
Um, I love that. And then in terms of so telling their founder stories, right? Getting in front of the camera and doing videos. Are there specific formats that you've used again and again that you find to be successful? Like, for example, there was Tori Dunlap from her first 100K actually taught us about the format where it's the tips on the video, but it's 7 seconds,
Yes.
but it's not quite enough time for you to get 7 seconds, and it helps increase your engagement. Any
Yes.
like fun insider
Yes.
tips for us?
Yeah, so that's like the text on screen strategy, which can be extremely successful. Like, so like 6 seconds, bunch of text, you're reading it through. For example, the Alinea Invest team had one of those videos reach 12 million views and they like doubled their revenue in 1 month. So it's like
What
a
was it
pretty
about? Was it
so
tips?
their text on screen strategy is very much like if you had invested X dollars in this company 5 years ago, you would now have X dollars. So like very much
Wow.
showing the impact of investing. So that drives, activation of like, oh, I should start investing because you see the power of it.
Right.
So yeah, text on screen is one. On Instagram, a strategy I've recently been trying out is similar text on screen, except for it'll be like one sentence of like, for example, for me, how I got $100,000 for my MBA at UCLA. And then at the very end, it's like, read the caption to learn more. And then in the caption, you have a long string of text so that people swipe up and they're reading it for a few minutes, and so the video keeps looping while the person's reading it.
Oh.
It's similar but different strategy. It doesn't work exactly the right way on TikTok because you can't read
If
long
it's
captions
too
very
long,
well.
like, does it cut the video out and then it stop it?
No, it keeps going.
Oh,
So that's a really good Instagram strategy that I've had a lot of success with recently.
I love that. We're gonna have to start using that one ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's see what other, and then I think we have a lot of. I'm going to go back to investing now because
Okay.
we have a lot of questions about investing. Um, so how do you, Momo asks how you typically support startups you invest in beyond providing capital. So I'm going to assume social is a big way.
Yeah. Social is definitely like, I would say, my biggest value add. So that's one, I try and promote the companies I invest in on my own social channels, so like incorporating companies in my content at least once a month. And then obviously like advising companies. Like I helped the Alinea team on that strategy that got that big video that popped. And then I would just say I'm always trying to like introduce founders to other investors in my network. And so Bridge Club and like the interviewing I do with other VCs has been a powerful way for me to build my investor network. And so always trying to pass that back to my founders as well.
Love that. And we have somebody asked, I'm going to go back to Jennifer's question, and that's how do you approach funding pre-revenue? Do you have any thoughts on that, on how they can be effective?
Yes. I mean, I think it just, again, goes back to like, if you don't have revenue, like what are the other traction metrics that you can show? And again, kind of hard to say exactly without knowing the business, but what can you
Does
show?
social help for you? Like if they have a good social following or social engagement metrics?
Sure, social following, but then it's like, have you converted that social following to an email list or a wait list? Like, has there been any kind of like real signal of like customer conversions? Like maybe you have a landing page that shows like the basics of what you are going to build. And so like, yeah, social following is great, but it's like, what's the next step to converting those people to what you are building?
Paying, yeah, customers. Elizabeth also asked what your favorite social media hooks are.
My favorite social media hooks. I feel like mine are normally like how Melanie Perkins built a X billion-dollar business, or like how this founder quit, why this founder quit Goldman Sachs to build X company. So again, it's normally like some big numbers in that first sentence to draw people's attention, or like some logo branded company name or school is and typically in my hooks.
Yeah. And then like for consumer companies, we have actually found in the past that doing things like, well, not we, but I actually have found as a customer, things I click on, or like, oh, Rate sent this text that was like, thanks for your RSVP. And then it was like for your Mother's Day brunch. And it was like a whole thing about there. I was like, wait, what did I RSVP to? And then I clicked on it. And at first I was like, that's kind of annoying. That was confusing. But then I was like, that was actually really good. That was good. I like this little
But it's
arrangement.
like what
they
do
have.
what you have to do to get people's attention these days, because it's
very
tough
hard.
to cut through the noise.
I'm going to answer one more question with you, and then we're going to wrap. But let's see. Okay. Kendra asked a great question. How do you educate investors about your audience if it is very stigmatized, specialized, and niche?
Yes. I think even if you're not building in a very stigmatized business or industry, like I think educating investors is like one of the most important things, just because I think you have to remember that most VCs probably do not understand your business near any level that you do. And so, yeah, I think just kind of leaning into education, again, your founder story, I think is like a helpful way to kind of show your reasoning and also maybe like why the need for this business exists.
What if it's like a sex tech business, or maybe you are in cannabis, for example, like some of the like vice industries? What are your recommendations where there's a lot of also social sort of monitoring around certain things that you might want to put out there? Or like there's a company that I know that is they provide products for women that have had breast cancer, and so it's like all about boobs. How do you
Yeah,
think about
I think it depends like what platform you're on. If you're like talking about social media versus talking to investors and pitching, I think Nadia, the founder of August, could be a good case study in
that?
how you talk about like periods. And yeah, I don't know that I have the answer to that,
But
but
I
I
think
think just like
stigmatized often the better the following, right? Like it's like a more polarizing topic is always a topic that like people inherently are actually more interested in. And you could use those numbers in your investor meeting, even if you're
for
not
sure.
showing on the screen or
Yes,
you know,
yes.
getting
I've
into
seen
every
like the
position that you
difference of
talk
her
about.
the difference of her pitch versus her social media is obviously very different. Like in the pitch, she's kind of highlighting the social media metrics and how that impacts the business. And so, yeah, definitely like a different approach based on the audience of like who she's speaking to. And so I think you just have to kind of trust your judgment when it comes to that.
Awesome. Ruffin, are you accepting pitches right now and are you actively investing?
Yes, yes. So
Awesome.
yeah, I can share my email for that. If that is helpful.
Amazing. Yeah, and how else do people get in touch with you and follow the work that you do? Because you guys, she does such incredible work and provides so many resources. I think that's one thing I would note about you that I've seen is one of the reasons why you've such a following is because you do so much diligence and work and research that you put into your content, and then ultimately you actually give real resources that are incredibly service oriented. So I would say that's a big learning.
Well, I'm definitely still learning myself, so just try and share everything that I'm learning along the way with everyone following along. But yeah, you can look me up on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Ruffin Mitchener. My email is hi@ruffinmitchener.com, HI, so you can easily find me there and pitch me there as well.
Amazing. All right. Thank you all for being here. I know you had a lot of questions about investment. Feel free to hit me up as well on LinkedIn, or I can also give you my email. And a reminder, we have our 10th house tech cohort happening right now. You can be in all sorts of industries of tech. I know it's a very broad one, even though the stats are pretty bleak in terms of how many women are out there. So that's why we want to bring you all together and get you into rooms to help solve each other's problems as you're going through them. But that is the 10th house, and we will supply a link in the comments for those of you who want to check it out. Thank you for joining, Ruffin. Thank you so much as always. You're such a gem and a gift for all of us founders out there and investors alike. So we appreciate you sharing all this knowledge and doing so much work to pull it all together.
Amazing. Well, so much fun, and I appreciate you having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.